Poverty rates are skyrocketing among women. You don't lose people all at once, you lose them quietly, one decision at a time, until one day they stop showing up and you realize they are not coming back. The real story here is not about anger or revenge or anyone winning or losing. It is about what happens when trust slowly erodes over years, and nobody wants to admit it until the silence gets loud. Stick with this, because by the end, you're going to see that what looks like a sudden shift has actually been building for decades. And the part most people miss is who really changed and why it matters more than anyone wants to admit. If you are getting something out of these angry guy talks and you want to support it, you can grab me a Red Bull with a one time gift or set up a monthly pledge using the link in the description. No pressure, but it helps keep the engine running. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth that people dance around but rarely say clearly. A lot of people are stepping back from relationships, not because they hate anyone, not because they are bitter, but because the cost started to feel higher than the return. And when I say cost, I am not just talking about money, I am talking about time, energy, attention, peace of mind, and the constant feeling that you are navigating a situation where the rules are not clear and the expectations keep shifting. When people feel like they are walking into a situation where they have more to lose than gain, they stop playing the game, not out of anger, but out of self preservation. That is not dramatic, that is human nature. For years, the conversation around relationships has been framed in a way that often focuses on what one side should improve, what one side should fix, what one side should provide, and what one side should tolerate. Over time, that kind of imbalance creates tension, even if nobody openly admits it. People start to feel like they are being evaluated more than appreciated, like they are being measured against expectations that never quite settle, and like they are responsible for outcomes that are not entirely in their control. When that feeling sits long enough, people do not explode, they withdraw. And withdrawal is quieter, but it is far more permanent. There is also a shift happening in how people define a good life. It used to be that relationships were seen as a central pillar, almost a default path. Now, more people are questioning that assumption. They are asking whether they are actually happier in those situations or whether they were following a script that was handed to them without much thought. And when someone steps outside that script and realizes they can create stability, comfort, and even satisfaction on their own, it changes how they evaluate everything else. It does not mean they reject connection, it means they become more selective about it. Another factor that cannot be ignored is the economic pressure that has been building across the board. Costs are higher, stability feels less certain, and people are more aware of how quickly things can shift. When the environment becomes more unpredictable, people become more cautious. They start thinking in terms of risk and reward, not just emotionally, but practically. They look at their situation and ask whether adding complexity improves their life or complicates it. That calculation does not always favor jumping into something that feels uncertain or demanding. What you are seeing is not one group abandoning another, it is individuals recalibrating based on their experiences. Some people feel like they gave a lot and did not get the same level of return, so they decide to pull back. Others feel like expectations have become unrealistic or unclear, so they choose to step out rather than constantly negotiate their place. And some simply discover that they enjoy their own space more than they expected, which makes them less willing to compromise that peace. None of this happens overnight, and none of it is as simple as blaming one side or the other. It is a gradual shift in mindset that builds until it becomes visible. There is also a layer of communication breakdown that plays into all of this. People talk past each other more than they talk to each other. One side expresses frustration in a way that sounds like accusation, the other side responds defensively. And before long, both sides feel misunderstood. Over time, those repeated interactions create a kind of fatigue. It becomes easier to step away than to keep trying to explain yourself in a way that may not land. And once that fatigue sets in, it is hard to reverse because it is not just about one conversation, it is about a pattern that feels exhausting to repeat. At the same time, there is a growing emphasis on independence that changes how people approach connection. Being able to support yourself, manage your own life, and make your own decisions is seen as a strength, and it is. But independence also reduces the sense of necessity that once drove people together. When you do not feel like you need someone, you approach relationships differently. You become less tolerant of friction, less willing to invest in something that does not feel right, and more comfortable walking away if it does not meet your standards. That is not inherently negative, but it does mean fewer people are willing to stay in situations that feel unbalanced. What makes the situation complicated is that both sides can point to valid experiences. One side can say they felt undervalued or overburdened, while the other can say they felt pressured or misunderstood. Both perspectives can be true at the same time. And that is where things become difficult because it is not about proving one side right and the other wrong. It is about recognizing that the dynamic itself has shifted in a way that creates friction. Ignoring that reality does not fix it, and exaggerating it does not help either. The idea that people are simply waiting for someone else to step in and solve their problems misses the point. Most people are trying to figure things out on their own, even if they struggle. The real issue is not about rescue, it is about alignment. When expectations, values, and priorities do not align, people drift apart. And when enough people experience that drift, it starts to look like a larger trend, even though it is really it, a collection of individual decisions. What we are witnessing is a recalibration of how people approach relationships, responsibility, and personal fulfillment. Some are choosing solitude because it feels simpler and more predictable. Others are still seeking connection, but with clearer boundaries and expectations. And some are caught in between, unsure of what they want, but certain that the old approach no longer works for them. That tension creates a landscape where fewer people are willing to engage without careful consideration. If you strip away the noise, the core issue comes down to trust and perceived fairness. People want to feel like what they put in is respected and that the outcome is not stacked against them. When that belief weakens, participation drops. It is not dramatic, it is not loud, it is just steady disengagement. And once disengagement becomes comfortable, it is hard to reverse because people build new routines around it. The challenge moving forward is not about forcing people back into old patterns, it is about understanding why those patterns broke down in the first place. Without that understanding, any attempt to rebuild will feel temporary or superficial. People need clarity, consistency, and a sense that they are not stepping into a situation where they are automatically at a disadvantage. That requires honesty from everyone involved, not just one side adjusting while the other stays the same. And here is where it gets interesting because the longer people stay in their separate lanes, the harder it becomes to bridge the gap. Habits form, expectations settle, and the idea of changing course starts to feel less appealing. That is why this moment matters. It is not about assigning blame, it is about recognizing a shift that has already happened and deciding what to do with it. Ignoring it will not make it go away, and reacting emotionally will not solve it either. It requires a level of reflection that most people avoid because it is uncomfortable. What you are really looking at is a crossroads, not a collapse, not a crisis in the dramatic sense, but a quiet turning point where people decide what they are willing to accept, what they are willing to offer, and what they are willing to walk away from. Those decisions shape everything that follows, and they do not just affect relationships, they affect how people see themselves and their place in the world. This is the part most people do not want to hear because it puts responsibility back on the individual. You cannot control what everyone else does, but you can control how you respond, what you tolerate, and where you invest your time and energy. Waiting for the environment to shift in your favor is a gamble. Adjusting your approach based on reality is a strategy. And the people who figure that out early are the ones who navigate this transition without losing themselves in the process. That is where the real conversation begins. And it is not about stepping away or stepping back in. It is about understanding the rules of the game as they exist now, not as they used to be, and making decisions that actually serve you in the long run. The next piece that people tend to overlook is how quickly perception can outpace reality and how that gap creates confusion that feeds into everything else. People are not just reacting to what is happening in their own lives. They are reacting to what they believe is happening around them based on what they hear, what they see, and what gets repeated often enough to feel true. When that perception becomes widespread, it starts to shape behavior in a way that reinforces itself, even if the original picture was incomplete or exaggerated. That means decisions are being made not only from lived experience, but from a collective narrative that may not fully reflect the nuance of real life. Once that narrative takes hold, it becomes difficult to challenge because it feels like common sense rather than an interpretation. At the individual level, this shows up in how people evaluate risk. If someone believes that entering a relationship comes with a high likelihood of stress, conflict, or imbalance, they will approach it with caution or avoid it altogether. That belief does not have to be perfectly accurate to influence behavior. It only needs to feel convincing enough to justify the decision. Over time, enough people making similar calculations creates a visible shift. Fewer people are willing to invest deeply, fewer are willing to take chances, and more are choosing to protect what they already have rather than gamble on something uncertain. That is not a moral judgment. It is a pattern that emerges when uncertainty rises. There's also a subtle but important shift in how people define responsibility. In the past, responsibility within relationships often came with a sense of shared burden, where both sides accepted that things would not always be perfectly balanced, but work toward a common goal. Now, there is a stronger emphasis on individual autonomy, which has its benefits, but it also changes how responsibility is distributed. People are more likely to draw clear lines around what they are willing to do and what they are not, which can lead to situations where both sides feel justified in their position but still end up disconnected. The challenge is that clear boundaries do not automatically create harmony. They create structure, but without alignment, that structure can feel rigid rather than supportive. Another factor shaping this landscape is the speed at which people can compare their experiences to others. When you constantly see examples of what appears to be a better situation, whether it is real or curated, it can make your own situation feel lacking, even if it is stable. That comparison creates pressure to optimize, to seek something better, to avoid settling. While striving for improvement is not inherently negative, it can lead to a cycle where nothing feels sufficient because there is always a perceived upgrade available. That mindset makes long term commitment more difficult because it keeps people looking over their shoulder instead of focusing on what is in front of them. At the same time, there is a growing recognition that not every traditional path leads to the outcome people were promised. Many have seen examples where following the expected script did not result in stability or satisfaction. That realization creates skepticism, and skepticism leads to hesitation. People begin to question whether the effort required to maintain a relationship is worth it if the outcome is uncertain. They start to ask whether they are better off building a life that does not rely heavily on someone else's consistency or choices. That line of thinking does not eliminate the desire for connection, but it reframes it as something optional rather than essential. What complicates matters further is that expectations have become more complex. People are not just looking for companionship, they are looking for alignment across values, goals, communication styles, emotional compatibility, and lifestyle preferences. While it is reasonable to want a good fit, the accumulation of these expectations can make it harder to find someone who meets all of them. When the bar is set high across multiple dimensions, the pool of potential matches narrows and the likelihood of dissatisfaction increases. That does not mean expectations should be lowered across the board, but it does mean there needs to be an awareness of how those expectations interact with reality. There's also a tension between independence and interdependence that has not been fully resolved. Independence is often celebrated, and rightly so, but relationships require a degree of interdependence that can feel uncomfortable if someone is used to operating entirely on their own. Learning how to rely on someone without losing a sense of self is a skill that takes time, and not everyone is willing to invest in developing it. When independence becomes the default, any form of reliance can feel like a risk rather than a strength, which changes how people approach commitment. On top of that, communication styles have shifted in ways that are not always productive. People are more aware of the language they use and the impact it can have, which is positive, but it has also created situations where conversations become overly cautious or indirect. Instead of addressing issues clearly, people may avoid difficult topics or soften their message to the point where it loses its meaning. That can lead to misunderstandings that build over time because the underlying issue is never fully addressed. Clear communication requires both honesty and the willingness to handle the discomfort that comes with it, and not everyone is prepared for that. Trust remains the central pillar in all of this, and once it is weakened, everything else becomes more fragile. Trust is not just about believing that someone will act in your best interest, it is about believing that the system you are operating within is fair. If someone feels like they are entering a situation where they could be misunderstood, misrepresented, or placed at a disadvantage, their willingness to engage decreases. Rebuilding that trust is not simple because it requires consistent behavior over time, not just words or intentions. It also requires both sides to acknowledge their role in maintaining that trust, which can be difficult when perspectives differ. There is also the reality that people are more aware of their options than ever before. When someone believes they have multiple paths available to them, they are less likely to tolerate a situation that does not meet their expectations. That awareness can be empowering, but it can also lead to a lack of commitment because there is always the possibility of something better. The paradox is that having more options does not always lead to better outcomes. It can lead to decision fatigue and a constant sense of uncertainty about whether the current choice is the right one. In the middle of all this, there are still people who are finding balance and building stable connections. Their experiences tend to be less visible because stability does not attract the same level of attention as conflict or change. These individuals are often focused on communication, mutual respect, and realistic expectations. They understand that no situation is perfect and that effort is required from both sides. Their approach does not rely on ideal conditions. It relies on consistency and a willingness to work through challenges without immediately stepping away. What sets these situations apart is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of a shared framework for handling it. Both sides have a clear understanding of what they are trying to build and what they are willing to contribute. They are not operating under the assumption that everything should feel easy all the time. Instead, they recognize that friction is part of the process and that resolving it can strengthen the connection if handled correctly. That mindset creates resilience, which is something that cannot be replaced by convenience or short term satisfaction. The broader trend, however, is still moving toward caution and selectivity. People are taking longer to commit, they are evaluating more carefully, and they are prioritizing their own stability before considering how someone else fits into their life. That approach has its advantages. But it also means that fewer people are willing to take the kind of risk that can lead to meaningful connections. Risk is an unavoidable part of any relationship, and avoiding it entirely limits what is possible. The challenge is finding a balance between protecting yourself and remaining open enough to build something worthwhile. There's also an element of timing that plays a role. People are not always in the same place at the same time, even if they might be compatible under different circumstances. One person may be focused on building their career, another on personal growth, and another on seeking stability. When those priorities do not align, even a strong connection may not develop into something lasting. Timing is often overlooked because it is not something that can be controlled, but it has a significant impact on outcomes. As this shift continues, there will likely be periods of adjustment where people test different approaches and refine what works for them. Some will move further toward independence, while others will seek to rebuild connection in new ways. The key is that these decisions are being made with a higher level of awareness than in the past. People are not simply following a script, they are actively choosing their path based on their experiences and observations. That level of agency changes the dynamic because it removes the assumption that everyone will follow the same trajectory. What remains constant is the need for clarity. Without clear expectations, clear communication, and a clear understanding of what both sides want, confusion takes over. And confusion is where most problems begin. It creates room for misinterpretation, unmet expectations, and frustration. Addressing that requires a willingness to be direct, even when it is uncomfortable. It also requires listening, not just waiting for a chance to respond. That level of engagement is not always easy, but it is necessary for building something that lasts. There is also a lesson in recognizing patterns without becoming trapped by them. It is easy to take a series of negative experiences and assume they represent the whole picture. While patterns can provide useful information, they can also limit perspective if they are treated as absolute. Each situation is different, and approaching it with a rigid expectation based on past experiences can prevent new outcomes from developing. That does not mean ignoring what you have learned, it means applying it in a way that remains flexible. Ultimately, what is unfolding is not a simple story with a clear conclusion. It is an ongoing process where people are redefining what they want and how they pursue it. Some will find that stepping back gives them the clarity they needed, while others will realize that connection, when done right, adds value that cannot be replicated elsewhere. Both paths have their place, and neither is inherently superior. The important part is that the choice is intentional rather than reactive. As more people navigate this shift, the conversation will continue to evolve. New perspectives will emerge, old assumptions will be challenged, and the balance between independence and connection will be tested in different ways. The outcome is not fixed, and it will depend on how individuals respond to the conditions around them. What is clear is that the old model is no longer operating in the same way, and adapting to that reality is not optional if someone wants to move forward effectively. The focus then should not be on forcing a return to what was or on rejecting what exists now. It should be on understanding the underlying dynamics and making choices that align with your own values and goals. That requires honesty, not just about others, but about yourself. It requires acknowledging what you bring to the table and what you expect in return. And it requires accepting that not every situation will meet those expectations, which means being willing to walk away when necessary without carrying unnecessary resentment. This is where the real work happens, not in broad statements or sweeping conclusions, but in the day to day decisions that shape how you interact with others and how you build your life. It is less about what everyone else is doing and more about how you choose to respond. That perspective shifts the focus from external factors to internal control, which is where lasting change begins. There's another layer to this that most people only start to notice once they have already stepped back, and that is the way habits reshape identity over time. When someone spends enough time operating independently, managing their own schedule, making decisions without compromise, and building routines that revolve entirely around their own priorities, that independence stops feeling like a temporary phase and starts feeling like a permanent baseline. It becomes comfortable in a way that is hard to describe unless you have experienced it, because it removes a constant layer of negotiation that used to exist in daily life. Once that layer is gone, the idea of reintroducing it can feel like adding friction back into a system that finally runs smoothly. That does not mean connection loses value, but it does mean the threshold for what is considered worth that friction becomes significantly higher. At the same time, people begin to refine what they actually need versus what they were told they should want. There is a difference between external expectations and internal priorities, and many only discover that difference after stepping outside the default path. When someone realizes that their sense of stability, peace, and direction does not depend on meeting certain milestones that were once considered essential, it changes how they evaluate everything else. They become less driven by social pressure and more guided by personal experience. That shift can be liberating, but it can also create distance from those who are still operating under the old framework because the assumptions no longer match. There is also a practical side to this that often goes unspoken, and managing a life independently forces people to develop skills that they may not have prioritized before. Financial planning, time management, problem solving, and self regulation all become more important when there is no one else to absorb the impact of mistakes. Over time, that competence builds confidence, and confidence reinforces independence. It creates a loop where the more capable someone feels on their own, the less they feel the need to rely on someone else for support. That does not eliminate the value of partnership, but it changes the motivation behind it. Instead of seeking someone to fill gaps, people begin to look for someone who complements what is already there. Another dynamic that plays into this is the role of expectations around effort. In any interaction, there is an implicit understanding of how much effort each person is willing to contribute. When that understanding is unclear or mismatched, it leads to frustration. One person may feel like they are carrying more weight, while the other may feel like their contributions are not recognized. Over time, those perceptions solidify into beliefs, and those beliefs influence future decisions. If someone consistently feels like the balance of effort is off, they may decide that the simplest solution is to step away rather than continue negotiating that balance. And there is also a psychological component tied to predictability. People generally prefer environments where they can anticipate outcomes, even if those outcomes are not perfect. Uncertainty introduces stress, and repeated exposure to unpredictable situations can lead to a preference for stability above all else. When someone compares the predictability of managing their own life to the variability of navigating a relationship, the difference can be significant. That comparison does not always favor taking on additional complexity, especially if past experiences have reinforced the idea that outcomes are difficult to control. At a broader level, there is a cultural shift toward personalization that influences how people approach every aspect of their lives. From the content they consume to the way they structure their day, people are increasingly accustomed to tailoring their environment to fit their preferences. That mindset carries over into relationships where the expectation of customization can clash with the reality that another person has their own preferences, habits, and limitations. When those differences become apparent, it can feel like a disruption rather than a normal part of interaction. Learning to navigate that tension requires patience and adaptability, which are not always prioritized in a culture that emphasizes immediate alignment. There is also the factor of long term thinking versus short term satisfaction. Building something stable often requires making decisions that do not provide immediate reward, but contribute to a stronger foundation over time. In contrast, prioritizing short term satisfaction can lead to choices that feel good in the moment, but do not support long term goals. When people are evaluating their options, the balance between these two approaches becomes critical. If the immediate experience does not feel rewarding, it is easy to move on, even if staying could lead to a better outcome later. That tendency can make it harder to develop connections that require time and effort to grow. And another aspect that deserves attention is the role of feedback loops. When someone makes a decision that leads to a positive outcome, they are more likely to repeat that decision. When the outcome is negative, they are less likely to take the same approach again. Over time, these feedback loops shape behavior in a way that feels natural, but is actually the result of accumulated experiences. If stepping back from relationships leads to a sense of relief or stability, that reinforces the decision to remain independent. If engaging in a relationship leads to stress or dissatisfaction, that reinforces the decision to avoid similar situations in the future. These patterns are not always conscious, but they are powerful. There is also a growing emphasis on self awareness that changes how people interpret their experiences. Instead of attributing outcomes solely to external factors, more individuals are examining their own role in the dynamic. This can lead to growth, but it can also lead to overanalysis, where every interaction is scrutinized to the point that it becomes difficult to act naturally. Finding the balance between reflection and action is important because too much focus on analysis can create hesitation, while too little can lead to repeating the same patterns without learning from them. In addition to that, there is a shift in how people view compromise. Compromise used to be seen as a necessary part of maintaining any long term connection, but now it is often evaluated more critically. People are asking whether the compromises they are making align with their core values or whether they are sacrificing too much of what matters to them. This reevaluation is not inherently negative, but it does mean that fewer people are willing to accept compromises that feel one sided or misaligned with their priorities. The result is a more selective approach to engagement where only situations that meet certain criteria are considered worth pursuing. There is also the influence of resilience, or in some cases, the lack of it. Resilience is built through experience, particularly through navigating challenges and finding ways to adapt. When people have not had the opportunity or the inclination to develop that resilience, they may be less equipped to handle the inevitable difficulties that come with any form of connection. This can lead to a tendency to withdraw at the first sign of friction rather than working through it. Over time, that pattern reinforces the idea that avoiding difficulty is the best strategy, even if it limits the potential for growth. Another element that plays a role is the concept of alignment over attraction. Attraction may draw people together initially, but alignment determines whether they can build something sustainable. Alignment includes shared values, compatible goals, and a similar approach to handling challenges. Without alignment, attraction alone is not enough to maintain stability. Recognizing this distinction changes how people evaluate potential connections because it shifts the focus from immediate chemistry to long term compatibility. That shift often leads to more cautious decision making because alignment takes time to assess. There's also a broader conversation about what success looks like in a personal context. Traditional markers of success may not hold the same weight they once did, and individuals are defining success in ways that reflect their own priorities. For some, that includes building a strong partnership, while for others, it involves achieving a high level of independence or pursuing specific goals without external constraints. This diversification of success metrics means that people are not all moving toward the same endpoint, which naturally leads to a wider range of choices and outcomes. At the same time, there is a need to acknowledge that no approach is without trade offs. Independence offers control and predictability, but it can also limit the depth of connection that comes from shared experiences. Engagement offers the potential for growth and support, but it also introduces complexity and uncertainty. Understanding these trade offs allows individuals to make informed decisions rather than reacting based on immediate emotions or external pressure. It also helps to set realistic expectations, which reduces the likelihood of disappointment. There is also the question of adaptability in a changing environment. As conditions shift, the strategies that worked in the past may no longer be effective. Being able to adjust to new realities is essential for navigating any transition. This requires a willingness to let go of outdated assumptions and to experiment with different approaches until something resonates. It is not a linear process, and it often involves periods of uncertainty, but it is necessary for finding a path that aligns with current circumstances. In this context, patience becomes an important factor. Building something meaningful takes time, whether that is a sense of personal stability or a connection with another person. Rushing the process can lead to decisions that do not hold up under pressure, while taking the time to understand what is actually needed can lead to more sustainable outcomes. Patience also allows for the development of trust, which cannot be forced or accelerated without consequences. There is also a role for accountability, not in a punitive sense, but as a recognition of responsibility. Each person brings their own perspective, habits, and expectations into any interaction, and those elements influence the outcome. Acknowledging that influence allows for adjustments that improve the overall dynamic. Without accountability, it is easy to attribute problems solely to external factors, which limits the ability to create change. As this process continues, there will likely be a period of recalibration where new norms begin to take shape. These norms will reflect the balance between independence and connection that individuals find most effective. They may not look the same as what existed before, and they may continue to evolve as conditions change. The important aspect is that they are developed through experience rather than assumption, which increases the likelihood that they will be sustainable. In the end, what stands out is not a single conclusion, but a series of decisions that collectively shape the direction people take. Each choice, whether to engage or step back, to invest or to hold back, contributes to a larger pattern that defines the current landscape. Understanding that pattern requires looking beyond surface level explanations and considering the underlying factors that drive behavior. It requires recognizing that change is rarely the result of a single cause, but rather the interaction of multiple influences over time. That perspective does not simplify the situation, but it does make it more manageable because it shifts the focus from trying to control everything to understanding what can actually be influenced. It allows individuals to navigate the environment with a clearer sense of purpose and a more realistic expectation of outcomes. And in a situation where uncertainty is a constant, that clarity becomes one of the most valuable tools available. There's a quiet turning point that happens after someone has spent enough time outside of the cycle, and it is not dramatic or loud. It is almost invisible, but it changes everything that comes after. It is the moment where the absence of something no longer feels like a loss, but starts to feel like stability. And that is a difficult thing to reverse once it settles in. When people reach that point, they are no longer comparing what they have to what they think they are missing. They are comparing any new possibility against a baseline of calm that they have already built for themselves. That baseline becomes the standard, not an ideal version of a relationship, not a hypothetical future, but the actual day to day experience they are living right now. And if something does not clearly improve that baseline, it does not feel like an opportunity, it feels like a risk. That shift in evaluation changes how decisions are made in a fundamental way. Instead of asking whether something could work, people start asking whether it is worth disrupting what already works. That question is far more difficult to answer because it requires a clear and immediate benefit, not just potential. It requires a level of certainty that is rarely available at the beginning of any connection. And because of that, many situations that might have developed in the past are now filtered out before they even begin. This is not about negativity, it is about prioritization. When someone has built a life that feels stable, they become protective of that stability and they are less willing to gamble with it. There is also a refinement of standards that happens over time, but it is not always what people expect. It is not necessarily about raising expectations in every category. It is about clarifying which expectations actually matter and which ones do not. Some things that once seemed important start to lose their weight, while other factors that were overlooked become non negotiable. This process is shaped by experience, not theory. It is the result of seeing what creates long term friction and what contributes to long term ease. As those patterns become clear, people adjust their criteria in a way that reflects their lived reality rather than abstract ideals. Another important piece of this is the role of emotional energy. People have a limited capacity for how much emotional effort they can invest at any given time. And how they choose to allocate that energy has a direct impact on their overall well being. When someone realizes that certain situations consistently drain more energy than they provide, they begin to avoid those situations, even if there are positive aspects involved. This is not about avoiding effort altogether, it is about being selective with where that effort goes. Over time, that selectivity becomes more pronounced, and it shapes the range of experiences that someone is willing to engage with. There is also a deeper understanding of patterns that develops with distance. When someone is in the middle of a situation, it can be difficult to see the recurring elements that define it. Everything feels immediate, and decisions are often made in response to what is happening in the moment. Once there is space, those patterns become more visible, and with that visibility comes a different kind of awareness. People begin to recognize the early signs of dynamics that did not work for them in the past, and they use that recognition to guide their choices moving forward. This does not guarantee perfect outcomes, but it does reduce the likelihood of repeating the same experiences without adjustment. At the same time, there is a recalibration of what it means to feel fulfilled. Fulfillment is often associated with external milestones, but when those milestones are no longer the primary focus, people start to define fulfillment in more personal terms. It becomes less about meeting expectations and more about creating a life that feels coherent and sustainable. That definition can include connection, but it does not depend on it in the same way. It allows for a broader range of possibilities because it is not tied to a single outcome. There's also an element of momentum that plays a role in all of this. Once someone has established a certain way of living, it creates a natural flow that is easier to maintain than to change. Introducing a new dynamic requires interrupting that flow, and interruptions come with a cost. They require adjustment, negotiation, and a period of uncertainty while things settle into a new pattern. If the perceived benefit of that change is not clear, the default choice is often to maintain the current state. This is not resistance to growth, it is a practical response to the effort required to shift directions. Another factor that becomes more apparent over time is the importance of consistency. Consistency is often undervalued because it does not stand out in the same way as intensity or novelty, but it is the foundation of stability. When people evaluate their experiences, they begin to recognize that consistency contributes more to long term satisfaction than occasional highs. This realization influences how they assess potential situations, placing greater emphasis on reliability and predictability rather than on initial impressions. There is also a shift in how people approach uncertainty. Early on, uncertainty can feel exciting, a sign of possibility and potential. Over time, repeated exposure to uncertainty without clear positive outcomes can change that perception. It can start to feel like a source of stress rather than opportunity. When that happens, people adjust their approach to minimize unnecessary uncertainty, focusing on areas where they have more control. This does not eliminate uncertainty entirely, but it changes how it is managed and where it is accepted. In addition to that, there is a growing awareness of how external pressures influence internal decisions. Social expectations, cultural narratives, and peer comparisons all play a role in shaping what people think they should do. When someone steps back and examines those influences, they often find that not all of them align with their personal goals. This realization leads to a filtering process where only the pressures that resonate are retained and the rest are set aside. That filtering process creates a more individualized path, but it can also create a sense of separation from those who are still influenced by the broader narrative. There is also the matter of long term sustainability. It is one thing to engage in a situation that works in the short term, it is another to maintain it over an extended period. Sustainability requires a balance of effort, compatibility, and shared direction. Without that balance, even situations that start strong can become difficult to maintain. As people gain more experience, they begin to prioritize sustainability over initial appeal, which leads to more deliberate decision making. Another dimension that becomes clearer with time is the role of mutual investment, a situation where both sides are equally committed to contributing and maintaining the dynamic tends to be more stable than one where the effort is uneven. Recognizing the importance of mutual investment changes how people evaluate potential connections. They look for signs that the other person is equally engaged, not just in words, but in actions. Without that alignment, the situation is less likely to progress beyond the initial stages. There is also a shift in how people interpret signals. Early on, signals can be misread or overemphasized, leading to conclusions that may not be accurate. With experience, people become more discerning, focusing on patterns rather than isolated instances. This reduces the likelihood of overreacting to single events and encourages a more measured approach to interpretation. It also allows for a clearer understanding of whether a situation is developing in a positive direction or not. At the same time, there is an increased emphasis on boundaries. Boundaries are not just about protecting oneself from negative experiences, they are about defining the conditions under which someone is willing to engage. Clear boundaries create a framework that supports stability, but they also require enforcement. Without enforcement, boundaries lose their effectiveness and can lead to the same issues they were meant to prevent. Establishing and maintaining boundaries is an ongoing process that evolves with experience. There is also a recognition that not every opportunity needs to be pursued. In the past, there may have been a tendency to explore possibilities more broadly, but with time comes a more selective approach. This selectivity is not about limiting options, it is about focusing on those that align most closely with personal goals and values. It reduces the noise and allows for a more intentional use of time and energy. Another important aspect is the role of self trust. As people navigate different experiences and learn from them, they develop a stronger sense of what works for them and what does not. This self trust becomes a guiding factor in decision making, reducing reliance on external validation. It allows individuals to make choices that are consistent with their own understanding rather than being swayed by outside opinions. There is also an understanding that growth does not always require external input. While interaction can facilitate growth, it is not the only path. Personal development can occur through reflection, exploration, and the pursuit of individual goals. Recognizing this broadens the scope of what is considered valuable and reduces the pressure to seek growth solely through connection. At a broader level, there is a shift toward viewing life as a series of interconnected choices rather than a predetermined path. This perspective emphasizes agency and responsibility, highlighting the impact of each decision on the overall trajectory. It encourages a more thoughtful approach to decision making, where the long term implications are considered alongside immediate outcomes. There is also an appreciation for simplicity that emerges over time. Complexity can be engaging, but it can also be draining. Simplifying certain aspects of life creates space for focus and clarity, which contributes to a sense of control and stability. This preference for simplicity influences how people structure their lives and the types of situations they choose to engage with. Another element that becomes more apparent is the importance of alignment between actions and values. When there is a disconnect between what someone believes and how they behave, it creates internal tension. Aligning actions with values reduces that tension and leads to a more coherent sense of self. This alignment becomes a priority because it supports long term stability and satisfaction. There is also a recognition that not all challenges are worth addressing. Some challenges lead to growth and improvement, while others lead to unnecessary stress without meaningful benefit. Distinguishing between the two allows individuals to focus their efforts on areas that provide a return on investment, both emotionally and practically. In the end, what emerges is a more deliberate approach to life. Decisions are made with a clearer understanding of priorities. Boundaries are set with greater confidence, and engagement is guided by alignment rather than impulse. This does not eliminate uncertainty or difficulty, but it provides a framework for navigating them in a way that is consistent and intentional. That framework becomes the foundation for everything that follows, shaping how individuals interact with the world and the choices they make moving forward. It is not static, it evolves with experience, but it provides a sense of direction that is grounded in reality rather than assumption. And in a landscape that is constantly changing, that sense of direction is what allows people to move forward without losing their footing. There comes a stage where reflection turns into recalibration, and that shift is subtle but decisive. Reflection is about looking back and understanding what happened, but recalibration is about adjusting how you move forward based on that understanding. It is the difference between observing patterns and actively changing your behavior in response to them. Once someone reaches that stage, their decisions start to carry a different kind of weight because they are no longer reacting to situations as they arise. They are shaping the conditions they are willing to operate within. That shift creates a sense of control that is not dependent on external factors, and it becomes one of the most stabilizing elements in a person's life. As this recalibration takes hold, priorities tend to narrow in a way that increases clarity. Instead of trying to accommodate a wide range of possibilities, people focus on a smaller set of outcomes that matter most to them. This narrowing is not about limitation, it is about precision. It allows individuals to invest their time and energy more effectively because they are not spread across multiple competing objectives. That focus often leads to better results, not because the path is easier, but because it is more aligned with what the person actually wants to achieve. There is also a growing awareness of how decisions compound over time. A single choice may not seem significant in isolation, but when similar choices are made consistently, they create a trajectory that becomes difficult to alter. Understanding this compounding effect encourages more intentional decision making because it highlights the long term impact of what might otherwise seem like small actions. It also reinforces the idea that consistency is more important than intensity because it is the accumulation of actions that ultimately defines the outcome. Another element that becomes more prominent is the distinction between control and influence. People often try to control outcomes that are inherently uncertain, which leads to frustration when those outcomes do not align with expectations. Recognizing the difference between what can be controlled And what can only be influenced allows for a more effective allocation of effort. It shifts the focus toward actions that have a direct impact while accepting that some variables will always remain outside of one's control. This perspective reduces unnecessary stress and creates a more realistic framework for evaluating results. There is also a refinement in how people interpret success and failure. Instead of viewing outcomes as binary, there is a greater appreciation for the information that each result provides. Success is not just a confirmation that something worked, it is an opportunity to understand why it worked and how it can be replicated. Failure is not just a setback, it is a source of insight into what needs to be adjusted. This approach transforms experiences into data that can be used to improve future decisions, creating a continuous cycle of learning and adaptation. At the same time, there is a shift in how people approach risk. Risk is no longer seen as something to be avoided entirely, but as something to be managed strategically. This involves evaluating the potential upside and downside of a situation and determining whether the risk aligns with one's overall objectives. It also involves recognizing that not all risks are equal and that some carry a higher probability of negative outcomes than others. By approaching risk in a structured way, individuals can make decisions that are both informed and aligned with their goals. There is also an increased emphasis on self regulation. The ability to manage one's own reactions, emotions, and impulses becomes a critical factor in maintaining stability. Without self regulation, external circumstances can have a disproportionate impact on internal state, leading to inconsistent behavior and decision making. Developing this skill requires practice and awareness, but it provides a level of control that is essential for navigating complex situations. It also contributes to a sense of confidence that comes from knowing that one's actions are not solely dictated by external events. Another important aspect is the role of perspective. The way a situation is interpreted can significantly influence the response to it. By actively shaping perspective, individuals can approach challenges in a way that emphasizes opportunity rather than limitation. This does not mean ignoring difficulties, but it does mean framing them in a way that allows for constructive action. Perspective acts as a filter through which experiences are processed, and adjusting that filter can lead to different outcomes, even when the external conditions remain the same. There is also a growing understanding of the importance of pacing. Moving too quickly can lead to decisions that are not fully considered, while moving too slowly can result in missed opportunities. Finding the right pace requires a balance between urgency and patience, where actions are taken with intention but not rushed. This balance allows for thoughtful decision making without falling into indecision, creating a rhythm that supports both progress and stability. In addition to that, there is a recognition of the value of resilience as an ongoing process rather than a fixed trait. Resilience is not something that is either present or absent. It is something that is developed through repeated exposure to challenges and the ability to recover from them. Each experience contributes to a deeper capacity to handle future difficulties, creating a cumulative effect that strengthens over time. This perspective encourages a proactive approach to challenges where they are seen as opportunities to build resilience rather than obstacles to be avoided. There's also a shift toward evaluating situations based on their long term alignment rather than their immediate appeal. This involves considering whether a particular path supports the broader direction one wants to take, even if it does not provide instant gratification. It requires a level of discipline to prioritize long term outcomes over short term rewards, but it leads to more sustainable progress. This approach also reduces the likelihood of making decisions that feel good in the moment but create complications later. Another dimension that becomes clearer is the importance of adaptability in maintaining momentum. When conditions change, the ability to adjust without losing direction is essential. This involves reassessing strategies, identifying new opportunities, and being willing to modify plans as needed. Adaptability does not mean abandoning goals. It means finding alternative ways to achieve them when the original path is no longer viable. This flexibility allows for continuous progress, even in the face of uncertainty. There is also an appreciation for the role of discipline in creating freedom. While discipline is often associated with restriction, it actually provides the structure needed to achieve desired outcomes. By establishing consistent habits and routines, individuals create a foundation that supports their goals. This structure reduces the need for constant decision making, allowing for more efficient use of time and energy. Over time, the benefits of discipline compound, leading to greater flexibility and control. At the same time, there is a recognition that not all opportunities are equal and that discernment is necessary to identify those that are worth pursuing. This involves evaluating potential outcomes, understanding the resources required, and considering how each opportunity fits within the overall plan. By being selective, individuals can focus their efforts on areas that offer the greatest return, rather than spreading themselves too thin across multiple directions. There is also a deeper understanding of the importance of alignment between intention and action. It is not enough to have clear goals. Those goals must be supported by consistent behavior. When there is a disconnect between what someone intends to do and what they actually do, progress becomes inconsistent. Aligning intention with action requires accountability and a willingness to adjust habits that do not support the desired outcome. This alignment creates a sense of coherence that reinforces confidence and stability. Another aspect that becomes more prominent is the role of feedback in refining strategy. Feedback can come from results, from other people, or from self evaluation, and it provides valuable information about what is working and what is not. Incorporating feedback into decision making allows for continuous improvement, ensuring that strategies remain effective over time. It also prevents stagnation by encouraging regular reassessment and adjustment. There is also a shift toward valuing sustainability over intensity. Intense bursts of effort can produce short term results, but they are often difficult to maintain. Sustainable effort, on the other hand, creates steady progress that can be maintained over the long term. This approach prioritizes consistency and balance, reducing the risk of burnout and ensuring that progress continues even when motivation fluctuates. In addition to that, there is an increased focus on building systems that support desired outcomes. Systems provide a framework for action, making it easier to maintain consistency without relying solely on willpower. By creating processes that align with goals, individuals can reduce friction and increase efficiency. This approach shifts the focus from individual actions to the underlying structure that produces those actions, leading to more reliable results. There is also an understanding that clarity is a continuous process rather than a one time achievement. As circumstances change and new information becomes available, clarity must be revisited and refined. This ongoing process ensures that decisions remain aligned with current conditions rather than being based on outdated assumptions. It also allows for adjustments that keep progress on track. Another important element is the role of focus in managing complexity. When faced with multiple variables, it is easy to become overwhelmed and lose direction. By narrowing focus to the most relevant factors, individuals can simplify decision making and maintain momentum. This selective attention allows for more effective problem solving and reduces the likelihood of distraction. There is also a recognition of the importance of maintaining perspective over time. Short term fluctuations can create the impression of significant change, but when viewed over a longer horizon, those fluctuations often appear less impactful. Maintaining a long term perspective helps to prevent overreaction to temporary conditions and supports more measured decision making. At the same time, there is an appreciation for the role of incremental progress. Large changes are often the result of many small steps taken consistently over time. By focusing on incremental improvements, individuals can build momentum without requiring dramatic shifts. This approach makes progress more manageable and reduces the pressure associated with achieving immediate results. There's also a shift toward prioritizing clarity and communication, both internally and externally. Clear communication reduces misunderstandings and ensures that intentions are accurately conveyed. It also supports better collaboration when interaction is involved, as it creates a shared understanding of expectations and objectives. Another dimension that becomes clearer is the importance of aligning actions with capacity. Taking on more than can be effectively managed leads to diminished results and increased stress. By understanding and respecting personal capacity, individuals can allocate resources in a way that supports sustainable progress. This alignment ensures that effort is applied where it can be most effective. There's also a recognition that progress is not always linear. There will be periods of rapid advancement, as well as periods of consolidation or even temporary setbacks. Understanding this variability allows individuals to maintain momentum without becoming discouraged by fluctuations. It also reinforces the importance of consistency, as steady effort over time tends to produce results even when short term progress is not immediately visible. In the end, what emerges is a more refined approach to navigating complexity, where decisions are guided by clarity, consistency, and alignment with long term objectives. This approach does not eliminate challenges, but it provides a framework for addressing them in a way that is both effective and sustainable. It emphasizes the importance of intentional action, continuous learning, and the ability to adapt as conditions evolve. And in doing so, it creates a path that is both stable and responsive, allowing individuals to move forward with confidence even in an environment that is constantly changing. There is a point where clarity stops feeling like an advantage and starts feeling like a responsibility, because once you see something clearly, you cannot unsee it. And that awareness demands that your actions match what you now understand. Before that point, it is easy to move through situations on instinct, reacting in the moment, making decisions based on habit or expectation without questioning them too deeply. After that point, every decision carries a level of intention that did not exist before. And that can feel heavier at first because it removes the comfort of ambiguity. You're no longer guessing your way through things. You are choosing, and choosing requires ownership of the outcome, whether it works in your favor or not. That shift toward ownership changes how people approach responsibility in a very practical sense. It becomes less about assigning fault and more about identifying leverage. Instead of focusing on what went wrong or who caused it, the question becomes what can be adjusted to produce a better result next time. That perspective is not about ignoring mistakes or dismissing negative experiences. It is about extracting value from them in a way that leads to improvement. It creates a forward facing mindset that prioritizes progress over blame, which is essential for maintaining momentum over time. As this mindset develops, there is also a refinement in how people evaluate effort. Effort is not treated as inherently valuable simply because it exists, it is evaluated based on its effectiveness. This leads to a more strategic approach where actions are chosen for their ability to produce results rather than for their appearance of productivity. It requires a willingness to let go of activities that consume time without contributing to meaningful progress, even if those activities feel familiar or comfortable. That willingness can be difficult to develop, but it is necessary for optimizing outcomes. There is also a deeper understanding of how attention functions as a limited resource. Where attention goes, energy follows, and where energy is invested, results tend to appear. Recognizing this connection encourages a more deliberate allocation of attention, focusing on areas that align with long term goals while minimizing distractions that do not contribute to those goals. This does not mean eliminating all forms of distraction, but it does mean being conscious of how attention is distributed and making adjustments when it becomes misaligned. Another layer that emerges over time is the recognition of trade offs in every decision. There is no path that provides all benefits without any cost, and understanding this reality allows for more informed choices. Instead of searching for a perfect option, people begin to look for the option with the most acceptable set of trade offs. This approach reduces indecision because it shifts the focus from finding an ideal solution to selecting the most suitable one based on current priorities. It also reinforces the importance of clarity in those priorities as they serve as the basis for evaluating trade offs. There's also a shift in how people handle setbacks. Instead of viewing setbacks as indicators of failure, they are treated as part of the process. This does not diminish their impact, but it does place them within a broader context where they can be analyzed and learned from. This perspective reduces the emotional weight of setbacks, allowing for a quicker recovery and a more constructive response. It also encourages persistence, as the presence of setbacks is no longer seen as a reason to stop, but as a signal to adjust. In addition to that, there is an increased emphasis on building capacity rather than relying solely on outcomes. Capacity refers to the ability to handle a range of situations effectively, and it is developed through consistent effort and exposure to challenges. By focusing on capacity, individuals create a foundation that supports a variety of outcomes, making them less dependent on any single result. This approach provides stability because it ensures that progress can continue even when specific outcomes do not materialize as expected. There is also a recognition that alignment is not static, it evolves over time. What aligns with someone's goals and values at one stage may not align at another. This requires periodic reassessment to ensure that decisions remain consistent with current priorities. Without this reassessment, there is a risk of continuing on a path that no longer serves its intended purpose. This process of realignment is ongoing and requires both honesty and flexibility. Another dimension that becomes clearer is the role of environment in shaping behavior. The conditions in which someone operates have a significant impact on their ability to maintain consistency and achieve their goals. By adjusting the environment to support desired behaviors, individuals can reduce friction and increase the likelihood of success. This might involve structuring time, managing external influences, or creating systems that reinforce positive habits. The key is to recognize that behavior is not solely a product of willpower, but is heavily influenced by context. There is also a shift toward valuing depth over breadth. Instead of spreading efforts across multiple areas, there is a focus on developing expertise and consistency in a smaller number of domains. This depth creates a stronger foundation and allows for more meaningful progress. It also reduces the cognitive load associated with managing too many variables at once, making it easier to maintain focus and direction. At the same time, there is an appreciation for the role of patience in achieving complex outcomes. Some results cannot be accelerated without compromising quality, and recognizing this prevents unnecessary frustration. Patience allows for the natural development of processes that require time, ensuring that the outcome is stable and sustainable. It also reinforces the importance of consistency, as steady effort over time is often more effective than sporadic bursts of intensity. There is also an increased awareness of how internal narratives influence external behavior. The way someone interprets their experiences shapes their expectations and decisions. By examining and adjusting these narratives, individuals can create a more constructive framework for understanding their situation. This does not involve ignoring challenges, but it does involve framing them in a way that supports growth rather than limitation. Another important aspect is the role of clarity in reducing complexity. When objectives are clearly defined, decision making becomes more straightforward because each choice can be evaluated based on its alignment with those objectives. This reduces the likelihood of becoming overwhelmed by multiple options and helps maintain focus on what is most important. Clarity acts as a guide, simplifying the process of navigating complex situations. There is also a shift toward proactive behavior rather than reactive behavior. Instead of waiting for situations to arise and then responding, individuals begin to anticipate potential challenges and address them in advance. This proactive approach reduces the impact of unexpected events and creates a sense of control over the direction of progress. It also allows for more efficient use of resources as actions are taken with foresight rather than in response to immediate pressure. In addition to that, there is a recognition of the importance of consistency in maintaining momentum. Momentum is built through repeated actions that align with goals, and it is sustained by continuing those actions even when motivation fluctuates. By establishing routines that support consistency, individuals can maintain progress without relying on external factors to drive their behavior. This creates a stable foundation that supports long term outcomes. There is also an understanding that feedback is most valuable when it is specific and actionable. General feedback may provide a broad sense of direction, but it is detailed feedback that allows for precise adjustments. By seeking out and utilizing this type of feedback, individuals can refine their approach in a way that leads to measurable improvement. This process of refinement is continuous and contributes to the overall effectiveness of their strategy. Another dimension that becomes clearer is the importance of aligning effort with impact. Not all actions produce the same level of results, and identifying those that have the greatest impact allows for more efficient use of time and energy. This requires analysis and experimentation to determine which actions contribute most significantly to desired outcomes. Once identified, these actions can be prioritized, creating a more focused and effective approach. There's also a shift toward valuing sustainability in both effort and outcomes. Sustainable practices ensure that progress can be maintained over time without leading to burnout or diminishing returns. This involves balancing intensity with recovery, setting realistic expectations, and creating systems that support long term engagement. By prioritizing sustainability, individuals can achieve consistent results without compromising their well being. At the same time, there is an appreciation for the role of discipline in maintaining direction. Discipline provides the structure needed to stay aligned with goals, even when external conditions are not ideal. It acts as a stabilizing force that keeps progress on track, reducing the influence of fluctuations in motivation or circumstance. Developing discipline requires effort, but it pays dividends in the form of consistent and reliable progress. There is also a recognition that growth often occurs outside of comfort zones. While comfort provides stability, it can also limit development if it becomes the primary focus. By intentionally stepping into situations that require adaptation, individuals can expand their capabilities and build resilience. This process is not always comfortable, but it is necessary for achieving higher levels of performance and understanding. Another important aspect is the role of reflection in maintaining alignment, and regular reflection allows individuals to assess their progress, identify areas for improvement, and ensure that their actions remain consistent with their goals. This process provides an opportunity to make adjustments before small deviations become significant issues. It also reinforces the importance of intentionality in decision making. There is also a shift toward viewing challenges as opportunities for refinement rather than obstacles to be avoided. Each challenge provides information about what is working and what needs to be adjusted. By approaching challenges with this mindset, individuals can use them as a tool for continuous improvement rather than as a source of discouragement. In the end, what becomes evident is that progress is the result of a series of deliberate choices made consistently over time. Each choice contributes to the overall trajectory, shaping the direction and outcome of the journey. By focusing on clarity, alignment, and consistency, individuals can navigate complexity with a sense of purpose and control. This approach does not eliminate uncertainty, but it provides a framework for managing it effectively. And within that framework, there is a sense of stability that comes from knowing that decisions are not being made randomly or reactively, but are guided by a clear understanding of priorities and objectives. That stability becomes the foundation for everything that follows, supporting continued growth and adaptation in an environment that is constantly changing. At a certain point, the focus shifts again, not because something external forces it, but because the internal framework has matured enough to support a different kind of thinking. It becomes less about navigating situations and more about designing them. That difference might sound small, but it changes everything. Navigating implies reacting to what is already in front of you, adjusting as you go, trying to make the best of what exists. Designing means deciding in advance what you are willing to engage with, what conditions need to be present, and what outcomes are acceptable before you ever step into the situation. It removes a large portion of uncertainty because the criteria are already established, and anything that does not meet those criteria is filtered out early. This approach requires a level of discipline that most people do not initially realize is necessary because it involves saying no far more often than saying yes. It means passing on opportunities that might be good in isolation, but do not align with the broader direction you are committed to. It also means accepting that not every path will be explored, and that is a trade off that has to be embraced rather than resisted. The benefit is that the paths that are chosen receive full attention and effort, which increases the likelihood of meaningful progress. There is also a refinement in how value is measured. Value is no longer tied to immediate gratification or external validation, it is tied to alignment with long term objectives and the stability it creates. This shift changes how decisions feel in the moment because choices that might have seemed appealing before may now be seen as distractions. It also reinforces the importance of patience because the most valuable outcomes often require sustained effort over time rather than quick wins. Another aspect that becomes more apparent is the role of clarity in reducing cognitive load. When objectives are well defined, there is less mental effort required to make decisions because the criteria for evaluation are already in place. This allows for quicker and more confident choices, freeing up mental resources for other areas. Without clarity, each decision requires a fresh evaluation, which can lead to fatigue and inconsistency. By establishing clear guidelines, individuals create a system that supports efficient and effective decision making. There is also an increased awareness of how habits shape identity. Repeated actions reinforce certain patterns of behavior, and over time, those patterns become associated with how someone sees themselves. This means that changing behavior is not just about adjusting actions, it is about reshaping identity. When someone constantly acts in a way that aligns with their goals, they begin to view themselves as someone who operates at that level. This reinforces the behavior and creates a positive feedback loop that supports continued progress. At the same time, there is a recognition that identity should remain flexible enough to adapt as circumstances change. While consistency is important, rigidity can limit growth if it prevents adjustment to new information or opportunities. The balance lies in maintaining a stable core while allowing for evolution in response to experience. This ensures that progress continues without becoming constrained by outdated assumptions. There is also a deeper understanding of the importance of sequencing. Not all actions produce the same results when taken at different times, and the order in which steps are taken can influence the outcome significantly. By considering the sequence of actions, individuals can optimize their approach, ensuring that each step builds on the previous one in a way that maximizes effectiveness. This level of planning reduces inefficiency and increases the likelihood of achieving desired results. Another element that becomes clearer is the role of intentional constraints. While constraints are often seen as limitations, they can also serve as tools for focus. By limiting options, individuals can concentrate their efforts on what matters most, reducing the distraction of unnecessary choices. This approach simplifies decision making and enhances clarity, making it easier to maintain alignment with long term goals. There is also a shift toward viewing time as a strategic asset rather than a passive resource. Time is allocated based on priorities, and activities are evaluated based on how they contribute to overall objectives. This perspective encourages a more deliberate use of time, where each allocation is intentional rather than habitual. It also reinforces the importance of eliminating activities that do not provide meaningful value, creating space for those that do. In addition to that, there is an increased focus on leverage. Leverage refers to the ability to achieve greater results with less effort by applying resources in a strategic way. This can involve developing skills that have a broad impact, creating systems that automate repetitive tasks, or focusing on actions that produce disproportionate results. By identifying and utilizing leverage, individuals can maximize the effectiveness of their efforts and accelerate progress. There is also a recognition that consistency does not mean uniformity. While consistent effort is important, it does not require identical actions every day. Instead, it involves maintaining alignment with goals while adapting the specific actions to current conditions. This flexibility allows for responsiveness without sacrificing direction, ensuring that progress continues even as circumstances evolve. Another dimension that becomes more prominent is the role of feedback loops in maintaining alignment. Regular feedback provides information about whether current actions are producing the desired results. By incorporating this feedback into decision making, individuals can make adjustments that keep them on track. This process of continuous refinement ensures that strategies remain effective over time. There is also an understanding that clarity must be protected. External influences can introduce noise that obscures priorities, making it more difficult to maintain focus. Protecting clarity involves filtering information, setting boundaries around attention, and ensuring that decisions are based on relevant data rather than distraction. This protection is essential for maintaining direction in an environment that is often filled with competing signals. At the same time, there is an appreciation for the role of rest and recovery in sustaining performance. Continuous effort without adequate recovery leads to diminishing returns, reducing both effectiveness and well being. By incorporating periods of rest into their approach, individuals can maintain a higher level of performance over the long term. This balance between effort and recovery is a key component of sustainability. There is also a shift toward valuing quality over quantity. Producing a smaller number of high quality outcomes often has a greater impact than producing a larger number of lower quality ones. This focus on quality requires attention to detail, a willingness to invest time, and a commitment to standards. It also reinforces the importance of selectivity, as not every opportunity warrants the same level of effort. Another important aspect is the role of alignment between short term actions and long term goals. Each action should contribute in some way to the broader objective, creating a cohesive path forward. When actions are disconnected from goals, progress becomes fragmented and less effective. By ensuring alignment, individuals create a consistent trajectory that supports sustained advancement. There is also a recognition that decision making improves with practice. The more decisions someone makes within a structured framework, the more refined their judgment becomes. This experience allows for quicker and more accurate evaluations, reducing uncertainty and increasing confidence. And over time, decision making becomes more intuitive, supported by a foundation of knowledge and experience. In addition to that, there is an increased emphasis on eliminating friction. Friction refers to any obstacle that makes it more difficult to take action, whether it is physical, mental, or logistical. By identifying and reducing friction, individuals can streamline their processes, making it easier to maintain consistency. This approach increases efficiency and reduces the effort required to achieve results. There is also a shift toward proactive problem solving. Instead of waiting for issues to arise, individuals anticipate potential challenges and address them in advance. This approach reduces the impact of disruptions and ensures that progress continues with minimal interruption. It also reinforces the importance of foresight in maintaining stability. Another dimension that becomes clearer is the role of alignment between values and environment. When the environment supports personal values, it becomes easier to maintain consistency and achieve goals. Conversely, when there is a mismatch, it creates tension that can hinder progress. Adjusting the environment to align with values is a powerful way to support desired behavior and outcomes. There is also an appreciation for the importance of clarity in communication, not just with others, but internally. Clear internal communication ensures that decisions are based on accurate understanding rather than assumptions. It also supports consistency by reinforcing the connection between goals and actions. At the same time, there is a recognition that not all progress is visible. Some of the most important developments occur beneath the surface in the form of increased capacity, improved judgment, and refined processes. These changes may not produce immediate external results, but they create a foundation that supports future success. Recognizing this helps maintain motivation during periods where visible progress is limited. There is also a shift toward valuing stability as a form of progress. Stability provides a platform from which further growth can occur, and maintaining it requires consistent effort. While it may not always feel like advancement, stability is a critical component of long term success because it ensures that gains are preserved rather than lost. Another important aspect is the role of intentionality in maintaining direction. Each action is taken with a clear purpose, reducing the likelihood of drifting away from goals. This intentionality creates a sense of coherence where actions and outcomes are aligned in a way that supports overall objectives. There is also a recognition that adaptation is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of awareness. Being willing to adjust in response to new information demonstrates a commitment to effectiveness rather than attachment to a specific approach. This flexibility ensures that strategies remain relevant and capable of producing results. In the end, what becomes evident is that progress is not driven by isolated efforts, but by a system of aligned actions that reinforce each other over time. Each component of the system contributes to the overall outcome, creating a structure that supports consistent advancement. By focusing on alignment, clarity, and intentionality, individuals can navigate complexity with confidence, ensuring that their efforts lead to meaningful and sustainable results. There is a moment when everything becomes quieter, not because the world has changed, but because the internal noise has settled enough for you to hear your own direction without interference. And that is when decision making becomes less about searching and more about recognizing. You stop chasing clarity because you already have it, and instead, you begin to trust it, which is a different kind of challenge altogether because trust requires action. It is one thing to understand what you should do, it is another to consistently do it without hesitation, especially when there are easier alternatives that promise comfort in the short term. This is where discipline stops being an idea and becomes a requirement, because without it, clarity remains unused potential. Once that transition happens, there is a noticeable shift in how opportunities are perceived. They are no longer judged by how appealing they appear on the surface, but by how well they integrate into the structure that has already been built. Integration becomes the standard, and anything that does not fit cleanly is examined more critically. This reduces impulsive decisions and increases the likelihood that each choice contributes to a cohesive direction. It also means that fewer opportunities are pursued, but those that are chosen receive a higher level of commitment and focus. There is also a refinement in how energy is managed, and this goes beyond simple allocation. It becomes about protecting energy from unnecessary drains, recognizing that not all demands deserve a response. This requires the ability to differentiate between what is urgent and what is important, and to prioritize accordingly. Urgency often demands immediate attention, but importance determines long term impact. By focusing on importance, individuals can maintain alignment with their goals while still addressing necessary immediate concerns without becoming consumed by them. Another aspect that becomes clearer is the role of intention in shaping outcomes. Intention is not just about what someone wants to achieve, it is about the level of commitment behind that desire. Strong intention drives consistent action, even when conditions are not ideal, while weak intention leads to sporadic effort that produces inconsistent results. Strengthening intention involves aligning it with deeply held values, ensuring that it is not easily disrupted by external factors. This alignment creates a stable foundation that supports sustained effort. And there's also a growing awareness of how patterns of behavior create predictable results. When actions are repeated in a consistent manner, the outcomes become more predictable, which allows for better planning and adjustment. This predictability is not absolute, but it provides a framework for understanding how different inputs influence results. By analyzing these patterns, individuals can refine their approach, emphasizing actions that lead to positive outcomes and reducing those that do not. At the same time, there is an understanding that control is most effective when it is applied selectively. Attempting to control every variable leads to inefficiency and frustration, while focusing on key variables allows for more effective management of outcomes. This selective control requires identifying the factors that have the greatest impact and directing effort toward influencing them. It also involves accepting that some variables will remain outside of control, which reduces unnecessary stress. There is also a shift toward valuing consistency in decision making. Consistent decisions create a reliable framework that can be applied across different situations, reducing the need for constant reassessment. This does not mean that every decision is identical, but it does mean that they are guided by the same principles. This consistency builds confidence because it reinforces the connection between intention and action, creating a sense of stability even in changing conditions. Another dimension that becomes more prominent is the importance of alignment between effort and reward. When effort consistently leads to meaningful outcomes, it reinforces motivation and encourages continued engagement. When there is a disconnect between effort and reward, it leads to frustration and disengagement. Understanding this relationship allows individuals to adjust their approach, focusing on activities that provide a clear return on investment. There is also a recognition that clarity requires maintenance. It is not something that can be established once and then ignored, because conditions change and new information becomes available. Regular reassessment ensures that clarity remains relevant, allowing for adjustments that keep progress aligned with current objectives. This process is ongoing and requires both attention and willingness to adapt. In addition to that, there is an increased emphasis on reducing complexity wherever possible. Complexity can obscure important details and make decision making more difficult. By simplifying processes and focusing on essential elements, individuals can improve both efficiency and effectiveness. This does not mean ignoring important factors, but it does mean eliminating unnecessary layers that do not contribute to the outcome. There is also a deeper understanding of how momentum is built and maintained. Momentum is not the result of occasional bursts of activity, but of consistent effort over time. Each action contributes to a cumulative effect that becomes easier to sustain as it grows. Maintaining momentum requires discipline and focus, as well as the ability to continue taking action even when immediate results are not visible. Another important aspect is the role of focus in achieving high quality results. Focus allows for deeper engagement with tasks, leading to better outcomes. Without focus, effort is fragmented and results tend to be less consistent. Developing the ability to maintain focus involves minimizing distractions and creating an environment that supports concentration. This is essential for producing work that meets high standards. There is also a shift toward evaluating decisions based on their long term implications rather than their immediate effects. This requires a forward looking perspective that considers how current actions will influence future outcomes. By prioritizing long term alignment, individuals can avoid decisions that provide short term benefits but create complications later. This approach supports sustainability and reduces the likelihood of needing to correct course frequently. At the same time, there is an appreciation for the role of adaptability in maintaining progress. Conditions will change, and strategies that were effective at one point may need to be adjusted. Being able to adapt without losing direction is critical for navigating these changes. This involves reassessing priorities, modifying approaches, and continuing to move forward even when the path shifts. There is also a recognition that discipline is not about restriction, but about enabling desired outcomes. By establishing routines and habits that support goals, individuals create a structure that makes it easier to take consistent action. This structure reduces reliance on motivation, which can fluctuate, and ensures that progress continues regardless of external factors. Another dimension that becomes clearer is the importance of feedback in refining performance. Feedback provides information about how actions are being received and what adjustments may be necessary. By actively seeking and incorporating feedback, individuals can improve their approach and increase the effectiveness of their efforts. This process of refinement is continuous and contributes to overall growth. There is also a shift toward valuing resilience as a key component of success. Resilience allows individuals to recover from setbacks and continue moving forward without losing momentum. It is developed through experience and requires both mental and emotional strength. By building resilience, individuals can handle challenges more effectively and maintain progress even in difficult conditions. In addition to that, there is an increased focus on aligning actions with capacity. Understanding personal limits and working within them ensures that effort is sustainable and effective. Overextending can lead to burnout and reduced performance, while working within capacity allows for consistent progress. This alignment is essential for maintaining long term stability. There is also a recognition that clarity and confidence are interconnected. Clear understanding of goals and processes leads to greater confidence in decision making, which in turn supports consistent action. This confidence is not based on certainty of outcomes, but on trust in the process and the ability to adapt as needed. Another important aspect is the role of intentional practice in developing skills. Practice that is focused and deliberate leads to improvement, while unfocused repetition does not produce the same results. By identifying specific areas for development and working on them consistently, individuals can increase their effectiveness over time. There is also a shift toward prioritizing actions that create lasting value. This involves focusing on activities that contribute to long term goals rather than those that provide temporary satisfaction. By prioritizing lasting value, individuals can build a foundation that supports continued progress and stability. At the same time, there is an appreciation for the importance of maintaining balance. Balance ensures that effort is distributed in a way that supports overall well being, preventing any one area from becoming overwhelming. This balance allows for sustained engagement and reduces the risk of burnout. There is also a recognition that progress requires both action and reflection. Action drives movement, while reflection ensures that movement is in the right direction. By combining these elements, individuals can maintain alignment and continue improving their approach over time. Another dimension that becomes more prominent is the importance of clarity in defining success. Success must be clearly defined in order to be achieved, and that definition should be based on personal values and goals rather than external expectations. This clarity ensures that effort is directed toward meaningful outcomes. There is also a shift toward viewing challenges as opportunities to refine systems and processes. Each challenge provides insight into what can be improved, allowing for adjustments that increase efficiency and test effectiveness. This perspective transforms challenges into tools for growth rather than obstacles to be avoided. In the end, what becomes evident is that sustained progress is the result of a structured approach that emphasizes clarity, consistency, and alignment. Each element supports the others, creating a system that is both stable and adaptable. By maintaining the system, individuals can navigate complexity with confidence, ensuring that their actions lead to meaningful and lasting outcomes. There is a stage where the entire process becomes less about effort and more about precision, where the volume of what you do matters less than the accuracy of what you choose to do. And that transition is where most people either level up or plateau without realizing why. Early on, progress often comes from doing more, trying more, pushing harder, expanding in every direction to see what sticks. But over time, that approach becomes inefficient because the margin for error shrinks as expectations rise. What once worked through sheer momentum begins to require refinement, and refinement demands a different kind of attention, one that is focused, selective, and deliberate. It is not about abandoning effort, it is about directing it in a way that produces consistent results without unnecessary waste. When precision becomes the priority, there is a natural shift toward eliminating anything that does not contribute directly to the outcome. This is not always easy because some activities feel productive even when they are not. And letting them go requires honesty about what actually moves things forward. It also requires a willingness to sit with less activity while maintaining confidence that the chosen actions are sufficient. This can feel counterintuitive at first, especially for those who are used to equating busyness with progress. But over time, the results speak for themselves. Fewer actions executed with greater accuracy tend to outperform a larger number of scattered efforts. There is also refinement in how decisions are filtered, and this filter becomes increasingly strict as clarity improves. Instead of evaluating options based on a broad set of possibilities, decisions are measured against a narrow set of criteria that reflect current priorities. This reduces noise and allows for faster, more confident choices. It also creates a level of consistency that makes outcomes more predictable because the same standards are applied across different situations. This consistency is not rigid, but it is structured enough to provide a reliable framework for action. Another dimension that becomes more apparent is the role of timing in execution. Even the right decision can produce suboptimal results if it is made at the wrong time. And recognizing this requires an awareness of context that goes beyond the immediate situation. Timing involves understanding when conditions are favorable, when additional preparation is needed, and when waiting will produce a better outcome than immediate action. This awareness develops through experience and observation, and it becomes a key factor in maximizing effectiveness. There is also a deeper understanding of how momentum interacts with precision. Momentum provides the force that drives progress, but without precision, it can lead in the wrong direction. Precision ensures that momentum is applied effectively, guiding it toward outcomes that align with long term goals. Balancing these two elements is critical because too much emphasis on momentum without direction leads to inefficiency, while too much focus on precision without action leads to stagnation. The goal is to create a system where both elements support each other, producing steady and accurate progress. At the same time, there is an increased emphasis on clarity of intent. Intent is not just about what you want to achieve, it is about why it matters and how it fits into the broader picture. Clear intent provides a foundation for decision making, ensuring that actions are aligned with deeper motivations rather than superficial desires. This alignment creates a sense of purpose that sustains effort over time, even when immediate results are not visible. There is also a recognition that efficiency is not about doing things quickly, but about doing the right things with the least amount of wasted effort. This distinction is important because speed without direction can lead to poor outcomes, while deliberate action, even if it takes longer, tends to produce better results. Efficiency requires an understanding of what matters most and a commitment to focusing on those areas while minimizing distractions. Another aspect that becomes clearer is the role of consistency in maintaining high standards. Standards define the level of quality expected in each action, and maintaining them requires discipline. When standards are consistently upheld, they create a baseline that supports reliable outcomes. Lowering standards for the sake of convenience can lead to short term gains, but often results in long term issues that require correction. Maintaining high standards ensures that progress is built on a solid foundation. There is also a shift toward viewing setbacks as calibration points rather than disruptions. Each setback provides information about what needs to be adjusted, allowing for more precise action moving forward. This perspective reduces the emotional impact of setbacks and encourages a more analytical approach to problem solving. It also reinforces the idea that progress is not linear, but iterative, with each cycle and bringing improved understanding and execution. In addition to that, there is an increased focus on optimizing processes rather than relying solely on individual actions. Processes provide a framework for consistency, ensuring that tasks are performed in a way that produces reliable results. By refining these processes, individuals can improve efficiency and reduce variability, creating a system that supports sustained performance. This approach shifts the focus from isolated efforts to the underlying structure that drives those efforts. There is also a recognition that clarity must be paired with adaptability to remain effective. While clear objectives provide direction, the ability to adjust to changing conditions ensures that progress continues even when circumstances shift. This balance allows for both stability and flexibility, creating a dynamic approach that can respond to new information without losing focus. Another dimension that becomes more prominent is the importance of prioritization. Not all tasks carry the same weight, and identifying those that have the greatest impact allows for more effective use of time and energy. Prioritization requires an understanding of how different actions contribute to overall goals, and it often involves making difficult choices about what to focus on and what to set aside. This selectivity is essential for maintaining efficiency and achieving meaningful results. There is also an increased awareness of how environment influences performance. The conditions in which work is done can either support or hinder progress, and optimizing the environment can significantly improve outcomes. This may involve reducing distractions, organizing resources, or creating routines that facilitate focus. By aligning the environment with objectives, individuals can enhance their ability to maintain consistency and precision. At the same time, there is an appreciation for the role of discipline in sustaining effort over time. Discipline ensures that actions are taken consistently, even when motivation fluctuates. It provides a stable foundation that supports progress, allowing individuals to continue moving forward regardless of external conditions. Developing discipline requires commitment and practice, but it is one of the most reliable ways to achieve long term success. There is also a shift toward valuing depth of understanding over surface level knowledge. A deeper understanding allows for more accurate decision making and more effective problem solving. It enables individuals to anticipate challenges and respond with informed strategies, reducing the likelihood of errors. This depth is developed through focused study and practical application, creating a strong foundation for continued growth. Another important aspect is the role of feedback in refining precision. Feedback provides insight into how actions are being received and what adjustments are necessary to improve outcomes. By incorporating feedback into decision making, individuals can fine tune their approach, increasing accuracy and effectiveness. This process is ongoing and requires openness to new information and a willingness to adjust. There is also a recognition that progress requires both patience and persistence. Patience allows for the natural development of processes that take time, while persistence ensures that effort is maintained even when results are not immediate. Together, these qualities create a balanced approach that supports sustained advancement without unnecessary frustration. In addition to that, there is an increased focus on aligning effort with purpose. Purpose provides the motivation behind actions, ensuring that effort is directed toward meaningful outcomes. When effort is aligned with purpose, it becomes easier to maintain consistency and overcome challenges because there is a clear understanding of why the work matters. There is also a shift towards simplifying decision making by establishing clear principles. Principles act as guidelines that inform choices, reducing the need for constant evaluation. By relying on established principles, individuals can make decisions more efficiently while maintaining alignment with their goals. This approach creates a stable framework that supports consistent action. Another dimension that becomes clearer is the importance of managing expectations. Unrealistic expectations can lead to disappointment and frustration, while realistic expectations provide a basis for measured progress. By setting expectations that reflect actual conditions, individuals can maintain a more balanced perspective and avoid unnecessary setbacks. There is also an appreciation for the role of focus in maintaining precision. Focus allows for deeper engagement with tasks, leading to higher quality results. Without focus, effort becomes fragmented, reducing effectiveness. Developing the ability to maintain focus requires minimizing distractions and creating an environment that supports concentration. At the same time, there is a recognition that clarity and confidence reinforce each other. Clear understanding leads to confident action, and confident action reinforces clarity by providing feedback. This cycle creates a positive loop that supports continued progress and refinement. There is also a shift toward viewing challenges as opportunities to improve precision. Each challenge highlights areas where adjustments are needed, providing valuable information for refinement. By approaching challenges with this mindset, individuals can use them to enhance their effectiveness rather than viewing them as obstacles. Another important aspect is the role of alignment between short term actions and long term goals. Ensuring that each action contributes to the broader objective creates a cohesive path forward. This alignment reduces the likelihood of wasted effort and increases the efficiency of progress. There is also a recognition that consistency in execution is more important than occasional bursts of intensity. Consistent action builds momentum and creates reliable outcomes, while sporadic effort leads to inconsistency. By maintaining a steady pace, individuals can achieve sustained progress over time. There's a final shift that happens when everything you have been building starts to operate without constant effort, when the structure is strong enough that it carries you forward even on days when you are not fully engaged. And that is where things become real, because the process no longer depends on bursts of motivation or external pressure to function. At that point, the habits, the systems, the standards, and the clarity all combine into something that feels stable, not because nothing changes, but because you have built a way of responding that remains consistent regardless of what does. That is where most people realize that the goal was never to control everything around them. It was to become someone who can move through uncertainty without losing direction. Once you reach that stage, the focus becomes less about building and more about maintaining. And maintaining requires a different mindset because it is easy to take stability for granted after it has been achieved. The danger is not in failure at that point, it is in slow drift, in small deviations that seem insignificant in isolation but accumulate over time. Preventing that drift requires awareness and regular adjustment, not in a reactive sense, but as part of a consistent process of checking alignment. It is not about constantly changing direction, it is about ensuring that the direction remains intentional rather than accidental. There is also a deeper understanding of how small decisions shape long term outcomes. At this stage, the impact of each choice becomes more visible because the margin for error is smaller. When the foundation is strong, even minor adjustments can produce noticeable changes in results. This awareness leads to a higher level of attention to detail, where decisions are made with consideration of their cumulative effect rather than just their immediate consequence. It is not about overthinking every action, but about recognizing that consistency in small areas reinforces stability in larger ones. Another aspect that becomes clear is the importance of protecting what has been built. Progress creates value, but that value can be diminished if it is not maintained. Protecting it involves setting boundaries, managing risks, and being selective about where energy is invested. It requires an understanding that not every opportunity needs to be pursued, especially if it introduces instability. This selectivity is not about avoidance, it is about preservation of the conditions that support continued growth. There is also a shift toward refinement rather than expansion. Early stages often involve exploring multiple directions to identify what works. But once clarity is established, the focus moves to improving what has already been proven effective. This refinement increases efficiency and quality, allowing for better results without necessarily increasing effort. It also creates a sense of mastery, where actions are executed with confidence and precision because they have been practiced and adjusted over time. At the same time, there is an appreciation for the role of adaptability in maintaining relevance. Even with a strong system in place, external conditions will change, and the ability to adjust ensures that the system continues to function effectively. Adaptability does not mean abandoning what works. It means making informed adjustments that keep the structure aligned with current realities. This balance between stability and flexibility is essential for long term success. There is also a recognition that clarity must be revisited periodically to ensure it remains accurate. As circumstances evolve, new information becomes available and priorities may shift. Revisiting clarity allows for adjustments that keep actions aligned with current objectives. This process is not disruptive when done consistently, it becomes a natural part of maintaining direction. Another dimension that becomes more prominent is the importance of discipline in sustaining results. Discipline ensures that the actions that created progress are continued, even when they no longer feel new or exciting. It provides the consistency needed to maintain stability over time, preventing regression. Without discipline, even well established systems can deteriorate, leading to a loss of momentum. There's also an increased awareness of how focus influences outcomes. At this stage, focus is not just about completing tasks, it is about maintaining alignment with priorities. Distractions become more noticeable because they interfere with established patterns, and managing them becomes a key part of maintaining effectiveness. This requires intentional effort to protect attention and ensure it is directed toward what matters most. In addition to that, there is a deeper understanding of how momentum can be both beneficial and misleading. Momentum can create the impression that progress will continue automatically, but without ongoing attention, it can shift direction or lose strength. Maintaining momentum requires consistent action and regular evaluation to ensure it remains aligned with goals. It is not something that can be set and forgotten, it needs to be actively managed. There is also a shift toward valuing sustainability over rapid growth. Rapid growth can be appealing, but if it is not supported by a stable foundation, it can lead to instability. Sustainable growth, on the other hand, builds gradually, ensuring that each step is supported by the structure beneath it. This approach may take longer, but it creates results that are more resilient and easier to maintain. Another important aspect is the role of feedback in maintaining performance. Feedback provides information about how well the system is functioning and where adjustments may be needed. By incorporating feedback into regular evaluation, individuals can make small corrections that prevent larger issues from developing. This process of continuous improvement ensures that performance remains consistent over time. There is also a recognition that clarity and confidence reinforce each other at this stage. Clear understanding of processes and objectives leads to confident execution, and confident execution reinforces clarity by producing reliable results. This cycle creates a stable environment where decisions are made with assurance rather than hesitation. At the same time, there is an appreciation for the importance of balance. Maintaining balance ensures that no single area becomes overwhelming, allowing for sustained engagement across different aspects of life. This balance supports long term stability by preventing burnout and ensuring that effort is distributed in a way that aligns with overall priorities. There is also a shift towards simplifying processes wherever possible. Simplification reduces the potential for errors and makes it easier to maintain consistency. By focusing on essential elements and eliminating unnecessary complexity, individuals can create systems that are both efficient and reliable. This approach enhances clarity and supports effective execution. Another dimension that becomes clearer is the importance of aligning actions with long term vision. Each action contributes to the overall direction, and ensuring alignment creates a cohesive path forward. This alignment reduces the likelihood of wasted effort and ensures that progress is consistent with broader objectives. There is also an increased focus on resilience as a means of maintaining stability. Resilience allows individuals to absorb disruptions without losing momentum, ensuring that progress continues even in the face of challenges. It is developed through experience and reinforced by consistent application of effective strategies. In addition to that, there is a recognition that growth does not stop once stability is achieved. Instead, it becomes more refined, focusing on incremental improvements that enhance performance. This continuous development ensures that the system remains effective and capable of adapting to new conditions. There is also a shift toward valuing precision in execution. Precision ensures that actions are carried out in a way that maximizes effectiveness, reducing wasted effort and improving outcomes. This focus on precision is supported by experience and clarity, allowing for consistent and reliable performance. Another important aspect is the role of intentionality in maintaining direction. Each decision is made with awareness of its impact on overall progress, ensuring that actions remain aligned with goals. This intentionality creates a sense of control and stability, supporting continued advancement. There is also a recognition that maintaining progress requires ongoing attention. Even well established systems need to be monitored and adjusted to remain effective. This ongoing attention ensures that small issues are addressed before they become significant problems, preserving the integrity of the system. At the same time, there is an appreciation for the role of patience in sustaining results. Patience allows for the natural progression of processes that take time, ensuring that outcomes are stable and reliable. It also reduces the pressure to achieve immediate results, supporting a more measured approach to progress. There is also a shift toward prioritizing quality over quantity in all areas. High quality actions produce better results and are more sustainable over time. This focus on quality requires attention to detail and a commitment to maintaining standards, but it leads to outcomes that are more consistent and reliable. Another dimension that becomes more prominent is the importance of alignment between values and actions. When actions reflect values, it creates a sense of coherence that supports confidence and stability. This alignment ensures that progress is meaningful and consistent with personal priorities. There is also an increased awareness of how environment influences performance. Maintaining an environment that supports focus and consistency is essential for sustaining results. This involves managing external influences and creating conditions that align with goals. In addition to that, there is a recognition that progress is the result of sustained effort over time rather than isolated achievements. Each action contributes to a larger pattern, and maintaining that pattern requires consistency and discipline. This understanding reinforces the importance of staying aligned with established processes. There's also a shift toward viewing challenges as opportunities to reinforce systems. Each challenge provides a chance to test the effectiveness of the structure and make adjustments that improve resilience. This perspective ensures that the system continues to evolve and strengthen over time. At the same time, there is an appreciation for the importance of clarity in maintaining direction. Clear understanding of goals and processes ensures that actions remain aligned and effective. This clarity supports confident decision making and reduces the likelihood of deviation. There is also a recognition that consistency is the foundation of stability. Consistent actions create predictable outcomes, allowing for reliable progress. Maintaining consistency requires discipline and focus, but it is essential for sustaining results over time. Another important aspect is the role of reflection in maintaining alignment. Regular reflection allows individuals to assess their progress, identify areas for improvement, and ensure that their actions remain consistent with their goals. This process supports continuous improvement and prevents drift. There is also a shift toward valuing sustainability in all aspects of progress. Sustainable approaches ensure that results can be maintained over the long term without compromising well being. This focus on sustainability supports consistent and reliable advancement. In the end, what becomes clear is that the process is not about reaching a final destination, but about creating a system that allows for continuous progress and adaptation. Each element of the system contributes to its overall effectiveness, creating a structure that supports long term success. By maintaining clarity, consistency, and alignment, individuals can navigate complexity with confidence, ensuring that their efforts produce meaningful and lasting results. Shout out to the 2 Hour Gang. For those who made it all the way through, the ones who stayed locked in and actually followed the entire line of thought from beginning to end, you already understand that none of this is about shortcuts or quick fixes. It is about building something that holds up over time, something that does not collapse the moment conditions change. And if you have been getting value out of these angry guy talks, you already know where to go if you want to support it and keep it going. And more importantly, I want to know what you think about everything that was laid out here, whether you agree, whether you see it differently, and how you are applying it in your own life. So go ahead and share your thoughts and let the conversation happen, because that is where real insight starts to build. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.